Hi, this is Jason from Effective Dashboards, helping maintenance and reliability professionals get the most out of Power BI. So welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to be exploring the analytics options that are available within certain visuals. So the analytic options are under this little magnifying glass here, and depending on the visual that you select, there's a range of different options, and I'll be going through and discussing how to apply each one of these in this video. Okay, so let's crack on. So the first thing I've done here is I've got a trend of maintenance cost over time, and I've just made up some data here. Okay, so it's more or less just random data that I've put together here, and it trends the maintenance breakdown costs over a period of time. So in this first scenario, we're going to look at this trend line. Okay, so I've come in here, and all I'm going to do is press add, and we've got a trend line. So there's a number of different options here. You can see that the trend line it's added in a slightly downward slope to the trend line. Now the first thing you can do is you can change the colour of the trend line. Now I quite like to have a trend line for this example here, if it is just a trend, the same colour as the underlying data here with that little dashed line here. So it can be dashed, it can be solid, or it can be dotted. Now these options are available for each of the different types of line that you can add in. So I'm not going to go through them for every one of them, I'm just going to cover them in this part here. You can also change the transparency, so if I make it 50% transparent, you can see it just sort of sits behind here, and that's pretty much it for the properties of the line. If we go and look at the next level down here, we've got this combine series option here. Now if you put that on, all it seems to do is hide the option to color code this line. However, what you need to do there is go back to the fields, and in this legend here we add in a series basically, and for this data set here we've got this discipline as an option. So what we've got now is we've got a trend line, and we can see that the trend line is still just a single line. Now if I go back into the analytics tab, and we can see it says combined series is on. So what it's essentially done is it's averaged all of the values, but it's broken down the individual lines in the line chart into each of the different series, which in this example here is a discipline. Okay, so that's the average overall, and these are the different values for each of the different disciplines. Now if we go and actually combine series and switch that off, then what it does is it draws a line for each one of the values in the legend. Okay, so you can get a trend for mechanical, you can get a trend for electrical, you can get a trend for instrumentation, etc. So if you're going to use it, and if you're going to break it down, I mean 4 is probably the biggest number you'd want. It gets a little bit busy if you break it down by any more than 3 or 4 really. It does make sense to add in this this trend line for each one of the different values within this within the series here. So that's the first example here, where we've got a trend line. Okay, so a trend line is the first example. Okay, so the next example is going to be anomaly detection. So let's take the same line graph and the same data set for this one, and we're going to go in here, and I'm going to go right to the very bottom where it says find anomalies. Okay, and I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to press add, and we can see that it has done a couple of different things here. The first thing it's done is it's added in this grey background here, and what that does is for each data point, if we can see I've highlighted this data point here, it's got the actual cost, it's got the expected value based on the data points that's in the series, it's got the expected minimum value and the expected maximum value, as you can see in the tooltip there. Now any of these values that are out with the expected value, so here's one here that's got this little flag on it, there's one here as well, there's one here, so any of these values are essentially saying that this is an anomaly. It's out with the expected range of where Power BI thinks it should be. Now that expected range is based on the sensitivity value here, so if I ramp this up to 90% and apply it, we can see that this range is right down, but this one here is saying, well actually look, the expected range here was this spike here, but actually it's far lower than we thought it was. So if I go and click on here, what it does is it says the costs are unexpectedly low. Okay, so we expected the cost to be high based on the trend of the data on the 25th of February 2019. It had a value of 601. So I click on here, 601 was the cost, which is below the expected range of between 930 and 1150. Now, it does say you've got this option here, possible explanations, and it says there's an error here in the analysis. I'll come to that in a second. So this is identified the different anomalies, and you can have the sensitivity, and you can change that sensitivity to be well, it's default to 70, and that's just the range that it'll look at. You can see it increases or decreases the range based on the sensitivity. So we'll leave it at 90 because it's picking up a few here. So this is areas that we might want to go and investigate because they are out with the normal range. Now the next thing we can do is there's a few different options here. Well, first of all, let's cover some of the options. So the shape that identifies the anomaly, it's one of these little things. The default is like a teardrop, which is fine, but you could make it any other shape you need to. But we'll leave it as a teardrop just now, and you can change the size of that to make it bigger or smaller if it's appropriate. So I'll leave that at 5. The other thing you can do is the expected range. In fact, let's just change this back to make it slightly bigger. Put it back to 70, which is the default. Okay, so we've got an expected range here, which is quite big if you put it at 70. In fact, let's make it 80. Okay, now at the moment we've got a grey background here for that expected range. Now you can change that expected range style to be a fill, or it can be a line. Okay, so it can show you a really subtle upper and lower line, and you can actually also change the transparency value of that and the colour. So there's a few options you can do to change that. There we go. So it might be just making it slightly subtler. It might be more appropriate. However, the other option we've got is to populate this explain by field here. So the data that underlies this is split by discipline. So if I add, now at the moment it's aggregating the data by date, but if I put discipline in here and apply, now again there's an error here. And the reason for that is this option isn't available until you publish the actual report to the Power BI service. So I'll pause the video and I'll do that, and I'll come back and explain how you can use this explain by feature. Okay, so this report has been published to the Power BI service, and we can see that each one of these has still got this this teardrop to identify that it's an anomaly. It's out with the expected range of the data that we'd expect for this trend. So if I click on one of these, it's going to give us this pane at the side here. Now, because we've got this explain by possible explanations, what it does is it basically looks to explain why this, what underlying category this anomaly is most likely to be attributed to. So if we look at this one here, discipline is instrumentation. Looks like it accounts for 71% of this anomaly. Okay, and we can see at the bottom here we've got a little mini trend here. We've got the total cost here, and then underneath we've got the actual cost, or the proportion of that cost that is made up by the discipline of instrumentation. So it offers you a little bit of analytics out of the box to try and understand if there's any anomalies from the expected range, what it could be that's contributing towards that. Now you can add multiple fields. I've only added one, but you could add multiple fields into there if your data is structured in such a way that you've got multiple categories or multiple different columns that you want to potentially look for contributors towards the anomalous data. So that's the anomalies analytics. Okay, so next up we're going to talk about the X and Y constant lines. Okay, we're going to cover both of those. So I've got a slightly different data set here, still looking at maintenance costs, but this time there is a trend that is reducing over time. And I'm going to go in, and the first thing I'm going to use is this Y-axis constant line. So if I click on here and add, we can see that we've got a value defaulted in of 0 here. Okay, so this is ideal for adding in a target or a threshold value. And that's the example I'm going to talk about for this application. So there's two things you can do. The first one is we can just add a value in. So the target might be 100. And we can see here that we've got a target of 100, and you can clearly see where the values are sitting in relation to that target. Now, if you look at this FX button here, that allows us to define a field or a measure that calculates this value that's going to be applied to that particular line. So if I go and look at our tables, I've created a table, a really basic table that's got a cost threshold value of 110. Okay, so that's a field within a table called cost target threshold. Okay, that's the name of the table. So if I go back to this trend here, and rather than hard code it in here, I'm going to refer to the value that's stored in this table. So let's go to the FX button. And there is only one option here, field value. I'm going to go to this table and I'm going to select this cost threshold, which is the value we're going to use. Now, it does need to have a level of summarization, so I'm just going to choose average. But the average of one value is just going to be that value. We could have easily chosen the sum or the min or the max. It doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to just click this button here, and we can see that it's got an FX here, but the value has changed to, the line has changed to be 110. Now, I'm going to just cover some additional options that are more appropriate for these types of values here, these types of line here. So the first one is this data label. Okay, well, no, we never added a data label to the previous ones we covered. However, it does make sense to put a label on this line just to inform the people that are looking at it what the line actually represents and what its value is. So I click that to on, and we scroll down here. We've got some options that are now become available. Now, the text that's displayed as a default is the actual value, which is 110, so we're happy with that, the value is getting picked up properly from this table. You can either display the name, which is x-axis constant line 1, which will change in a second, or you can display both, which is the name and the value. Now, if you need to change the name, you simply scroll up here, and it doesn't look like you can change this name because it's grayed out, but if you double click on it, you can change this. Okay, and we can see that the cost threshold target name and 1110 has been added in here. Okay, now the other thing you can change here is the horizontal position. It can be the left or it can be the right. Now if you put it off to the right, it's going to get hidden here, so that's just going to be something you're going to have to try and figure out based on the data set that you've got. So we'll keep it at the left here so we can see it along here in this white space. And the other thing you can do is you can define the vertical position as being above or below this line. Now above is fine again, but if we just show you the under, and again it'll just depend on what's best and how many of these lines you actually add on as to where this is going to be. Is it going to be above or below the line, or to the left or to the right? So we'll just leave it above for just now. And then we've got units of measure, and we've got the decimal places, so we'll leave those as they are for just now. So that is the value there for the y-axis constant line. So we've used that as a target. The next option is the x-axis constant line. So really similar to the y-axis, but it's going to draw a line vertically through the x-axis, or on the x-axis. So let's add that in, and we're going to use it in this example here to represent specific dates where a couple of major events happened, and we want to see how those events then went on to influence the trend of cost over time. So the value here, again, we can use this fx to calculate a date. Okay, so it's recognized that we need a date here because there's a date in the x-axis. Now there is a video that I've created where we use this conditional formatting option here to calculate a date now line, which I'll leave a link to below. But in this example here, I'm going to add two of these lines, and I'm going to add one here, which is going to be on, let's say, the 29th of June 2020. Okay, I'm going to add one here, and then I'm going to add another one. It's going to be on, let's say, the 16th of November. Okay, so we've got these two values here. We've got the one on the 29th and the one on the 16th. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to label these as major reorganizations within the company. Okay, so I'm going to go and label these up. So we've done that, and let's click on org change 1, and we'll go down and put the data labels on, and we'll show both. And we can see that org change 1 was on the 29th. Now actually, you may or may not want that date in there, because we can kind of see here, but we'll leave it on for just now. And then let's see org change 2, both. Okay, so org change 1, org change 2. Now, with this x-axis lines, there is an additional option, and that option here is to add a shaded region. Okay, so at the moment there's none. So let's add in a shaded region, and we want to add it after this line. So we can see there's a shaded region after here. And I'm going to change the transparency to be 90%. And I'm going to do the same for org change 1 after. Now we can see that it's overlapped this one here, so let's change this shaded area to 90%. Okay, so what we've done here is we've actually gone and we've identified that here's the trend here over time, or here's the value, it is the trend. I mean the cost over time. Now we can see there's been an org change here, and a shaded region after that organization change. Now look, this one here is actually sitting in this organizational region here, so that might be a bit of might lead to a bit of confusion. So let's go and deal with that. So we'll go back in to org change 1, and what I want to do is change the horizontal position to be at the right, and then for org change 2 I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, so now they're sitting inside the actual shaded area, which I think is far more sensible. It makes it a bit more obvious that there's, on this date here there was an org change, and then on this date here there was an org change, and clearly we can see there was not much of a difference here, but after this org change here we can see this is where we've had what looks like a reduction in the actual the trend of just looking at the values here, we can see that it seems to be a reduction in a trend heading downwards after this particular org change. So another useful piece of analytics is to use these options to identify key dates and put a little bit of a narrative beside each one to explain what happened in that key date. So that is the x-axis lines. Okay, so the next option is going to be this option, which is to add a forecast. So I'm going to use the same trend that we've just discussed and talked about, and we're going to use the same cost data, and we're going to go and click on forecast, and we're going to add a forecast in here. Okay, so what the forecast has done is it's went and first of all forecasted 10 points into the future. Okay, now we can change that to be years, quarters, days, months. We could do it as months and then apply. Okay, so that's going to take us quite a bit into the future there. Now it's got a line here which is a midpoint, and it's got an upper and lower bound, and basically this confidence interval is saying that with the data that we've got previously, it's calculating the likely trend in the future, the likely forecast in the future, and estimating that these values are going to fall within this range here. Okay, it's going to fall within this range here. There's a 95% confidence interval. Now if we change this to be 90% and apply it, it's going to make it slightly wider, okay, because obviously it's the confidence is less that it's going to be within this range here. And if we make it slightly smaller, 75%, it will give us a smaller banding, but obviously there's a 75% confidence rate that the values are going to be in here, so there may well be some values that will come out of this range here, but most of them will be in this range here. Seasonality allows you to take into account if you've got peaks and troughs at certain times of the year. So if it was every quarter, for example, you would put in 4 here if you were choosing months. Sorry, 3. Likewise, if it was once a year and you were using a yearly forecast, then you would put that as being 12. But leaving it at auto seems to work pretty well. There's no seasonality built into this trend here. but that is available. Now the other option you've got is to ignore the last months. Now we've ignored the 0 months, so it's just basically started at the end point and started the forecast forward from there. But if I go and put in 5 here and apply it, then what it's doing is it's actually looking to start the forecast quite a bit before. So we'll put this interval back up to 95%. Well, actually, you can see at 75%. The forecast has started 5 months prior to the current date here. So we've got an opportunity to see was this is this upper or lower banding, is it accurate? And in most instances it is, but we've got a few values that are kind of out with it at the bottom here, which is reflected in, I guess, in the 75% confidence range. Now if we go and change it to 95% and apply it, we'll see less of these. Yeah, so it's extended it out, so there's only the one value here in terms of the confidence range. And if we did go back to, say, 10 months, we can see, oh, it started to kind of auto detect some sort of seasonality there as well. There's just the one value that's kind of came out of that. So what it does is, by starting this, or ignoring the last 10 months, you get an opportunity to see is the actual forecast close to or within the ranges for the actual data. Okay, so it's overlaid the forecast in the actual data. So that could be quite useful just to check the validity of the forecast before you just go back and say, well, okay, well, we are happy to start from 0 months and just work it forward from there. Okay, so that's the forecast, and yeah, it's available for you to add in and to automatically project what the likely values are going to be into the future. Okay, so for the next option, we are going to cover the average line and the median line. Okay, so let's first of all add an average in, and we can see, first of all, well, before I move on, the data set here is not a time series, but instead this is a list of companies, and we'll just add the date labels on. And for each company, we've got the monthly costs. Okay, now these could be thousands probably, but it's just a value here just to let us see some data that we can work with. We've got the different companies here, company 1 through to company 22, and then we've got our company in the mix as well, so we can see where we stand. Now we've added an average line here, and I'm just going to go in and add in this data label here. Okay, so the average here is 154.13. Okay, so with this decimal we're going to put it to 0. So 154. So the average is essentially what it says in the tin. It's each of all of the values summed together divided by the number of different data points, the number of different companies, including our company, and it's given as an average. Now the other option we've got, so that's quite handy, so we can see which companies are above or below the average really clearly. And we can see that our company is clearly below the average. Okay, it's below the average, it's in here. Now what we can do to make that a bit more obvious is go into data colors, and what I want to do is I want to set all of the other colors to a light blue, and then I'm going to turn on this show all. I'm going to find our company and I'm going to change it to the dark blue. Okay, so we can see our company stands out. So we're clearly below the average here of 154. Now the other option we've got is to add a line called a median line. So let's add that in, and let's go and add a data value, a data label there, and have it under. Okay, so that value is 138. Okay, you can see that there. Now it's not particularly great with this data set here because it is squashed in quite close to this the top of this bar here, but it's 138. Now what we can see, the median value is really useful if we've got examples here where we've got one value that's maybe really high or really low that could potentially obscure the kind of what the most likely value is going to be, and raise the average quite considerably. It doesn't raise it quite as much as it would be if this was slightly bigger, but what we've got is this median value lists each one of these from high to low and then selects the center value. That's all it does. Okay, so we've got the average and we've got the median value, so whichever one of those is most appropriate for your data set is the one you would use in this example here. Okay, so the next option we're going to look at is this option here, percentile line. Okay, so I've got the same option, I've got the same data set here with the companies. Our company's been highlighted, and I'm going to just go and press this add button here. So we want to see is our where is our company sit is in terms of the other companies. So the percentile line is has been added and it's defaulted to 90. Now I'm going to change that to 75. Okay, and we can see there's a line being drawn here, and let's add in the data label, and let's make that data label on the right hand side, and we'll change the decimal places to 0. Okay, so there's a line here and it's got a value of 176. Okay, so what it's saying is that any value, any company that's above has a value that's above 176 in terms of the average weekly costs over the last 12 months is in the top 25% of the companies. Okay, so the 75th percentile is essentially saying 75% of companies reside below this line. Okay, so 25% of companies by default must be above the line. So that's what that's doing here. So we can clearly see that we're not in this top percentile here. And we don't look like within the bottom percentile, but let's go and add in a bottom percentile line. So I'm going to change that to be 25. And we can see that we are above this bottom percentile line. So let's go and add another line here, change it back to 75. And we'll add two lines. Okay, we're going to add one for 25 and one for 75. Okay, so we can clearly see that we're in between these two here. We're not above the 75th percentile line. We're not below the 25th percentile line. We're in the middle here. Okay, now in terms of cost, I always think that displaying if the value is something you want to be for good is low, so the cost, the average breakdown costs over the last 12 months per week, we want it to be low. So what we will do is change it to this clustered bar chart, and I'm going to change how it's viewed to sort ascending. We'll just make it slightly bigger because we've got quite a lot of data points here. Just want to make sure we get everything in. Here we go, here's this one at the bottom. So we can clearly see those are the ones that we want to aspire to. They're in the top quartile here. So they are below this value of 118. And let's just make it slightly bigger. We've got this middle section here, and then we've got the top section. So let's go and actually add in in fact we need to, that's 25, that's 90, so let's change that to 75. There we go. And we'll add a value in here, add a data label just for the value, and we'll just change that to be displayed on the right hand side, and 0 decimal places. Okay, so we can see that these are the different quartile lines, and it just makes you focus on, right, we want to be low, so put low cost at the top, and that is going to be the top quartile here. So let's go and change that percentile 1 line, top quartile. I'll put both. Now we can see that it's kind of overlapped into here, so let's just put the name, top quartile, and then we'll change the second one. Okay, and I'm going to change the bottom quartile to be a different color. Let's choose a red color here, and we will put the line, the color to be the same, so we can clearly see that that's the bottom quartile, and we'll just put in the name. Okay, so we can overlap some conditional formatting, etc. But I have got a more detailed video that explains a bit more of that, and how to set up a top quartile, bottom quartile type chart. But this is really just quick and easy to set up using these lines here that are available underneath the analytics option. Okay, so that is the quartile or percentile lines option. Okay, so let's bring it all together and we'll cover the last two lines, which is the min and max lines. So I've come back to this this one we created earlier, where we've got this target here for cost of 110. We've got these changes here that have been highlighted. Now I'm going to go and add in a min line and a max line because I want to see well, have we actually been able to ever meet this target threshold, and what has been the highest value we've had in terms of our weekly maintenance costs. So let's go in and add in a minimum line here. We'll add that in and we'll call this lowest weekly cost. Okay, and we are going to change the data label here, and we're going to just show it as being both. And then I'm going to change just a couple of these to be a kind of green value. And I'll use the same for this as well. So just match the two values here. So the lowest weekly cost has been in 74, which was then. Let's put the highest weekly cost. So we can add a max line. We'll make that the red colour here. And I'm going to put that off to the right because it probably sits better across there on the right hand side. And I'm also going to put it, but I can see this is squashed up to the top corner here, so I'm actually going to put it underneath. So we're going to put it under. We can see it's moved that underneath there. And I'm going to change this to be the highest weekly cost. Okay, so we can see we've got the lowest and we've got the highest weekly cost. It kind of does encroach on here, so you probably wouldn't actually add that in, or potentially you might want to move those to the bottom. In fact, let's do that. Okay, so we can see it's at the bottom here. Doesn't really impact on this highest weekly cost. A trend line. Let's add a trend line in here. I'm just going to bring it all together just to show what's available, just to see. And we're going to make that trend line a little bit more subtle. Slightly darker blue. Yep. So we can see there's a trend line here, and we can see that the overall trend is going down. We can see here's the cost threshold value. So we are trending towards that value for sure, which is good. But when are we going to get to that value? Well, let's stick in a forecast and just see how it's looking moving forward. So we'll go and add a forecast, and we can see that we're forecast to be within this range here. We're going to go and forecast out for, let's say for the next 6 months. Okay, so we can see that we are forecast to continue down, but there will be some potential for some upside here as well. But it's certainly going to be within this lower range here, which is basically going to be, the upper bound is going to be 193 and the lower bound is going to be 72. Okay, we can see that in the pop-up box here. So yeah, it's pulling it all together. It's looking at really quick, really easy, no coding required, or very little coding unless you want to use some conditional format to drive some of the values. But at the end of the day, if you want to be able to create something that's really easy and really simple, then this Analytics tab offers lots of pretty rich options. So hopefully you find this useful. Hopefully you can apply this with your own data. And if you found it useful, then it would be great if you could give it a thumbs up. And if you want to keep up to date with the latest videos or release, which is run about every week, then if you press the subscribe button and you'll get a notification whenever I release a new video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next video.